Sony's range of Xperia phones has been refined somewhat over the past few years. You now have the Xperia 1, which is this phone, the smaller flagship Xperia 5, and the more affordable Xperia 10. Now in the 4th generation, this is an iterative design on what Sony Mobile themselves admit is something of a niche phone. It's a fully fledged flagship, but Sony designs this to appeal to users of Sony's other devices, particularly its alpha cameras. But is it any good? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and this is our review of the Xperia 1 IV. If you do like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any more. There's little physical difference between the Xperia 1 IV and the Xperia 1 III that it updates, and we're happy with that. The design is still dominated by Sony Mobile's use of a 21:9 display, so this phone is tall rather than wide. That again means that despite having lots of screen space, it's a little easier to grip than something like the Pixel 6 Pro. It's a narrower phone, so easier to get your hand around and easier to slip into a pocket. As we've seen from Sony Mobile for some time, it's a premium package with flattened edges making up that classic glass sandwich look. Although there's a delicate chamfer to take the sharp edges off, so it's a mite more elegant than Apple's similar design introduced on the iPhone 12. The front and rear are Gorilla Glass Victus designed to keep scratches at bay, with a pronounced camera section off towards the left-hand corner. But despite that Victus finish, we still managed to find some scratches on the device after a couple of weeks of use. The Google Assistant button found on the Xperia 1 III has now been removed, leaving us with a volume and the power button with embedded fingerprint scanner. The fingerprint scanner is pretty reliable, but we found it subject to phantom touches as always, often leading us to wait 30 seconds before trying again. While it is a neat implementation, we'd rather they went down the route of an in-display fingerprint scanner like most other Android phone makers. There's a dedicated shutter button and a 3.5mm headphone socket too. And let's not forget there's a micro SD slot in the SIM tray. The whole thing carries a dual IP65/68 rating. It means that you get great resistance against both submersion in water and water spray. Plus, there are stereo speakers on the frame which sound pretty good too, supported by Sony's dynamic vibration, which can add vibration to other media like games, although we found that to be a bit of a distraction. As media is a big thing for Sony, it's no surprise to find a range of sound options like Dolby Sound with various options, 360 upmix to produce 360 reality audio effects, and finally Sony's DSEE Ultimate, which uses AI to boost your compressed music sources for better results. Now moving on to another key part of the media experience, the display. And the key change here is that Sony has made it 50% brighter than the previous model. That makes it easier to see when outdoors in brighter conditions. But the size and the resolution remains. So this is a 4K display, which is something of a rarity, but note that this isn't the same resolution as your TV, which is 3840 by 2160 pixels. Because it's 21:9 ratio rather than 16:9, it's 3840 by 1644. The Xperia 1 IV then has one of the highest pixel densities of any mobile device, although you might not actually be able to see that in daily use. And whether or not you find 4K resolution useful on a phone, it depends on how many 4K movies in 21:9 ratio you find yourself watching, because it's pretty limited to that for the full feel of the resolution and aspect ratio. Plus, most streaming services on mobile don't offer much past HD resolution. There is also 120Hz refresh rates, but unlike most other flagships, there's no adaptive refresh rate, so you either get 60Hz or 120Hz depending on which you choose. However, that will keep scrolling content smooth, and we don't see the lack of adaptive refresh rate to be a big problem. As for color, there's creator mode, which makes the interface and everything look more natural but a little dull. However, you can set creator mode to automatically switch on when using particular apps, and you can manually specify what you want those apps to be. So you can have that vibrant, colorful look on the interface, but then a color that's better suited for movies and TV shows when you head over to Netflix or Prime Video, for example. One of the new additions is something that Sony calls Real-Time HDR Drive, and this aims to ensure that each frame of content adapts to the environmental conditions in HDR. Unfortunately, you can only switch it on when in creator mode, so we suspect it won't be widely used. With lots of tech crammed in, including lots of processing, we found the display and content to look good in pretty much all conditions. And because there's a little bezel and it hides the selfie camera, there's nothing to block your view either. That's likely to appeal to those who watch a lot of movies, and when you find a flick that matches the native aspect ratio of the display, it all fits like a hand in glove. This is where its display really is at its best. Now onto hardware and performance, and sitting at the heart of the Xperia 1 IV is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 with 12GB of RAM. That puts this phone right up there with other flagship devices. The performance is telling too, because this phone is smooth and fast through anything you throw at it. It's very much a flagship performance, and we found it nice and stable in the time that we've been using it. It will heat up though, and we found this phone to get pretty warm when gaming. Also, you'll notice the same with camera, and it will heat up when shooting 4K HDR video. This isn't a new thing for Sony though. We've seen this before on a number of Xperia devices. With that said, we've enjoyed long gaming sessions with no drop-off in performance from Call of Duty Mobile and other titles, while the useful gaming mode offers a great competition set, and will focus everything on the game and make sure you don't swipe out of it by accident. As for battery, that's rated at 5000 mAh, and Sony hasn't chased down top charging speeds on this device, instead offering 30 watts wired and 15 watts wireless, and there's no charger in the box. That's a fairly average speed, comparable with Samsung or Apple, but a long way behind the sorts of Oppo or Xiaomi who now go over 100 watts. The battery life is good though, and we found that the phone will, for the most part, make it through a typical day with no problem. So while the slower charging and average battery life don't make this phone stand out, they also don't leave it with a great disadvantage. Now let's move on to the all-important cameras, and Sony is stuck with a trio of 12 megapixel sensors on this one, including the one in the new zoom camera. And this actually is a zoom, because there's a moving lens element that travels from the equivalent of 85mm to 125, or 3.5 times to 5.2 times. That's all optical and comes from the periscope lens. Now, we've often been critical of Sony's approach to cameras on phones because it pushes that manual approach, rather than just using a fancy computational solution to make pictures look good with a simple press of a button. But for some people, those that Sony is aiming this product towards, that's exactly the approach that they want. The idea is that Sony provides you with the hardware and leaves you to manage the capture yourself, giving you manual controls that reflect those you'd find on an alpha camera. Now, Sony admits this is appealing to somewhat of a niche audience. The majority of customers just want to point and shoot and have a good photo. But the Xperia 1.4 wants you to do more to get that photo. So in daylight, you'll get away with shooting an auto or basic, and the Xperia 1.4 will grab natural looking images. It avoids that oversaturation that's common to other devices, so grass might be less green, skies might be less blue, but it'll be closer to what you're actually looking at. The manual settings are easy enough to use, and there's some great options in there, for example, manual focus. And focusing is generally a competitive advantage for Sony. It will focus on smaller objects where others just won't focus at all. But in video, you need to watch out for persistent focus seeking, which can make videos pulse. Where the Xperia 1.4 starts to struggle is in dim conditions. There's no night mode. And dim conditions do tend to have plenty of shadow noise creeping in, so if you want night photos, you'll be best going to manual shooting, keeping the ISO low, but then stabilization becomes a problem. While other phones will let you do these night shots completely handheld without any effort, Sony's will require some stabilization, and possibly even a tripod. Now, the ultrawide isn't as sharp or bright as the main camera, but the detail is nicely preserved across the whole focal length. Then there's that digital zoom out to 15.6 times, but these images are a tiny bit soft compared to the Pixel 6 Pro, which uses AI to sharpen up images. So not really that great. We still find it irritating that you can't pinch to zoom across the entire range. You have to tap through the different lenses. It's just more work when you want a quick snap. Video capture is part of the puzzle too, with Sony offering a Video Pro app to give more manual options over those offered by the camera app. Again, you can easily control everything to get the result you want, while 120Hz shooting is supported on all lenses. In the end, the Sony Xperia 1.4 updates the Xperia 1.3 while sticking to much the same design and approach. The camera is designed to appeal to those wanting to avoid AI and overprocessing with lots of manual options. But it does lack some of those basic point and shoot functions that would make it more competitive against other flagships. There's loads of power along with the advantage of a 3.5mm headphone socket and micro SD card slot, but this is an expensive phone. With premium design and quality build, there's lots to love about the Xperia 1.4, but also lots to think about too. I've been Cam. Let me know what you think of the new Xperia phone in the comments down below. You can get me on Twitter if you want to as well. I'm at Cam Bunton. I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.